Hi everybody, I'm Haley of Mothchild Cosplay. I know it's been a while since I made another time-lapse video. I think my last one was actually in February, so it's been a nice number of months, and I'm very sorry. But I am back. I have a few new projects that I'm making videos for, so let's go ahead and jump into the first one, which is my knight's garb from Bloodborne. First, I started out making my blouse, and I used McCall's M6124. I put it on my dress form, and then I began heavily modifying it. Here I am making the Elizabethan ruff. It's about 180 inches of paisley broadcloth cotton that I used the medium weight interfacing on to help it maintain its shape. And then I gathered it down and I sewed it onto my collar. And here shows the sleeves and how I altered them because they were also extremely altered. To get my embroidery designs, I actually printed out about 10 different pages of fancy line work designs, taped them onto a window, took my iron-on interfacing, and just traced out the designs that I wanted so that way I could transfer those over to my fabric and start the actual embroidery process. Here I am hand sewing my facing. The blouse is not lined. There were so many layers with costume already that I just didn't want to add an extra layer for lining. The blouse alone had over 5 yards of bias tape sewn on. That was a pain in the butt, but it was definitely worth it. I love the look the bias tape gave. The blouse also had 6 hook and eye closures down the front. The ones that I bought were a very, very shiny reflective gold, so to make them more rugged and Bloodborne-esque, I held them in a candle, allowed them to get very sooty, wiped off the excess soot, and then covered them with a regular old acrylic paint sealer. My vest was based roughly off of McCall's pattern, M6989. This is a really, really versatile pattern. I love it. I love it so much. I did not use the skirt that was given to you in the pattern. In fact, I drafted it based off of a half circle skirt pattern, which is by far my favorite. To get the sections for the embroidery on these skirt portions, I traced out the front, added in my seam allowance, and then that was how I got my shapes. I then repeated the whole thing with holding it up to the window and tracing out the designs to embroider onto the fabric for all the things that needed embroidery. You just kind of want to fill in randomly. Don't rely too heavily on these stencils. Kind of take a look at it, and if you see there's like an empty gap or you're not sure where to incorporate one of the shapes that you've picked out, draw it in by hand, freehand it. It's not a big deal. You know, it's your project. Just make sure that you're keeping in mind the stylistic lines that are on the knight's garb. And this is the only time-lapse video I have of me doing the embroidery. I had logged over 60 hours of just hand embroidery on this costume. It was incredibly relaxing. If you like hand sewing, I genuinely recommend getting into embroidery. Here's a picture of the back of the vest fully embroidered, the back and the second layer fully embroidered, and then the entire thing. Oh my gosh. It looked so nice. I'm so proud of it. Look at it. It's so great. Then here I am adding the bias tape. Once again, there was so much bias tape. Total for the entire costume, there were over 25 yards of bias tape. I finished almost all of my edges with either this weird tannish gold bias tape or 1/8 inch thick black bias tape. It just was a really, really nice finish, and I really think it was worth the effort. Here are the 2 skirt pieces pinned into the lining. I just wanted to show you guys this so you would kind of see how they're all connected. And then I began making the weird hat. I've never done millinery before in my life, but I'd seen people like Angela Clayton do it, and they do it beautifully, so I took some of the tips and tricks that they've shown and I applied that to my own stuff. I actually really like the hat. It's one of my favorite things, even if it is ridiculous and tiny. Next up comes the mantle. I used the same technique I used on my World of Warcraft Hunter Tier 10, where I used the aluminum foil to give some texture and body to it. After I did that, I got some rhinestones from the scrapbooking section of AC Moore and some puff paint, laid down my rhinestones, and started scribbling out some puff paint details, and here's the front and the back of the mantle. while I was letting the puff paint dry, I started sculpting the 4 hook and eye brooches that go onto the mantle that hold the cape onto it. I baked those and then I went out and sprayed my mantle. I used a textured metallic spray paint, and then once that was dry, I used some water and black acrylics and started to weather it. Next up is my Rakuyo, which I absolutely love. Here I am, I already cut the blades out and I'm sanding them down to get them to a nice edge. After that, I attached them to the handles. I just used basic PVC pipe. I wood burned the designs into my knife, and then after that I started sculpting the hilts and the handguards. I used an air dry clay for this. It took forever, but it was definitely worth it. I love the customization I was able to get with this, and it was just surprisingly easy. At that point, the air dry clay was not dry, but that was just after I had done it. I was just so proud. Look at how cool it looks. And then I did the exact same thing for the sword portion. For the little round handguard, I actually used 2 pieces of 3mm thick craft foam, and then I wood burned my designs into it, and I cut a slit down the middle for the sword handle to poke through, and then I slid that sucker on. I hot glued and secured it with super glue because I'm so concerned about it coming off. And then after that, I once again started sculpting. I used an air dry clay for the rounded portions of the handguard on the sword. The little wire bits, I actually used pieces of black Warbler for. Typically I don't use Warbler, but it really came in handy for this. And here I am kind of playing around with my sword. This wasn't necessary, but I felt like a badass, so I just wanted to keep it in sorry, not sorry. I went and gave both of those things a quick coat of metallic silver spray paint, and then I started painting. And then I added in all of my blood, and then that was it. After I finished up my Knight's Garb from Bloodborne, I had a wonderful photo shoot with my favorite photographer, the Nerdy Monkey, and here are some pictures of my finished product that we got with her. Also, I'm very proud to say that I took home first place Master Craftsmanship at Kineticon 2017 with this costume. This is by far one of my favorite costumes. It was a lot of fun to make. It was amazing to wear. It was so well received. Even people that did not know Bloodborne saw it and were like, oh my gosh, you made that? That's incredible. And it made me feel so good. Anyway, if you liked this and you want to see more content from me, I have a Facebook page. Go check me out, facebook.com/mothchildcc, or you can type Mothchild Cosplay and Creations into that search bar. I also have an Instagram, and that's @mothch1d. Thanks, you guys. Bye.